I became an astronomer because I could not imagine living on Earth and not trying to understand how the universe works. Vera Rubin. It's time for science, and it's time to talk about STEM learning and women in STEM. To close out our second season of It's Time for Science, we have two amazing interviews for you. Teacher Stacy Gale and science communicator Dr. Alex Dainis. Stacy Gale is currently a fourth grade teacher and former STEM specialist at Paul Cuffee School in Providence, Rhode Island. We discuss why STEM education is important to teach in schools, what got her interested in teaching STEM, and how STEM is the best and easiest way to engage students, and why teachers and parents need to keep pushing for incorporating more STEM. Dr. Alex Dainis has a PhD in genetics from Stanford University and is a freelance science communicator and video producer with over a decade of experience producing educational content for the web. We talk about why STEM education is critical for preparing people to make decisions about science, how her personal experiences in being mentored by teachers inspired her career, the critical thinking skills developed through STEM education that transcend science, and what got her started in science communication. It's time for science, and it's time to dive deep into the world of science, technology, engineering, and math, better known as STEM. And when I say dive deep, I mean that literally, because my guest is Stacy Gale, a STEM specialist at the Paul Cuffee School, a maritime charter school in Rhode Island, who has been on ocean exploration expeditions as an educator at sea. Stacy has many accolades for her teaching, such as being the 2022 Teacher of the Year of the Rhode Island Environmental Education Association, and a state finalist for the 2024 Presidential Awards for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching. So Stacy, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tom. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, let's dive right in and figure out what is STEM, what does it mean to you, and really why is it important in schools?
I think STEM is important for some really key reasons. First of all, it ties learning together for students. I feel like learning, even in elementary school, has become so segregated. You have to teach 90 minutes of ELA, 90 minutes of math, and it's not as thematic as it used to be, but STEM makes it that way. So you can take something that you're studying, for example, like when we were doing erosion and deposition in my classroom, we're studying the effects of erosion and deposition in that whole process, but then we'll take that idea, that scientific concept, and we'll turn it into a STEM idea by saying, okay, well, here's a huge problem that's facing us right now, right? We have all this erosion happening as a result of climate change, and we're going to need to solve that problem in the future. So let's look at our stream table models that we've been using, and now we're going to add some little houses in there, and you have to design a solution to keep these houses safe. And so kids will, we'll get some resources out. We'll have Legos, we'll have blocks, we'll have plants, and students have to collaborate in their teams, and they have to come up with a solution, and they have to build it in their stream table model. And to me, that's really authentic. And they're taking something that, now they have this strong knowledge base in science, but they're able to tie in some mathematical concepts because they have to measure how far the erosion is going. They're able to really collaborate and communicate, and all those 21st century skills that we want students to have. STEM ties all those in so beautifully.
How did you get into it in general? I know that at one point there was you were the STEM specialist at the school, and now it's more that they've switched to a model where everyone is teaching science and STEM. But how did you get into it? What was it that led you down that path from wherever it was you were studying?
Oh yeah, it's funny. I actually have my degree in physical therapy, so I have a science background. I went to Springfield College and studied physical therapy there, but I think sometime during that period of time I was at college, I was working as a camp counselor and teaching swim lessons. And I'm like, man, I really love teaching. And my parents are both teachers too. And actually my dad was like, you can do anything you want, just don't go into teaching. And all three of us are teachers, which is just really funny.
He tried his best.
He did really try. But so I kind of, when I got into teaching, that was my background. So I really wanted to focus on that. And then when I started teaching at Paul Cuffee, it was this maritime themed school, and my sister taught there too. She and I were really close, and I realized when I got there that, oh, this is an area I can really help, and it's a passion of mine, and I think that it's to me the easiest way to engage students is through science and STEM, and hands-on learning and critical thinking. Like students love to do that, so it
Mhm.
was an easy transition. And then once I got to Cuffee, yeah, it just really took off.
Well, it's one of my favorite things is the more I do this podcast is the way I grew up, everything was very siloed. You know, you learned in the different classes, like you had mentioned before. And I love that it's all hands on and it's mixing all these things together, getting all the different teachers and different disciplines involved. Because is that feeling, this is the kind of thing that, how does it help kids find like pathways into careers? How does have this STEM background help their futures?
Well, I think the skills that are so critical in STEM, anytime you're doing STEM, you are engaging students in those 21st century skills. They have to think critically on their feet. They have to collaborate with teams. They have to be able to problem solve. And they have to use creativity to solve these problems. And I don't think anything else that we teach in school really brings all of that together the way that STEM does. And
Mhm.
so, one of the things we talk about as teachers is that we are preparing students, we're trying to prepare students for careers that we don't even know are going to exist. The world is changing so fast. But all of those skills I just mentioned are definitely going to be necessary for students to have. So to me, like, how does STEM help kids get their, find pathways into careers? It's teaching them those critical skills that eventually are going to lead to whatever careers end up being out there. I think another huge thing that STEM does is it teaches kids how to fail. Because if you're trying to
Mhm.
solve a problem, the chances of you solving it the first time are slim to none. And so it's like, and the whole idea of, like, watching videos and listening to other scientists and STEM professionals say, like, oh yeah, like it took us a million times to get this right. But now, we've got it, and we're able to take it to the next level. And so that constant idea of reiterating what they're doing, and failing and getting up and trying again and using what that failure was to improve their thinking and improvise a new solution. I mean, all of that is really the skills that they're going to need. We don't know what careers are going to be out there, but we know they're going to need those skills.
I think it's great that science is one of those things where if you get it right the first time, you should be suspicious.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
like it's like, wait
Exactly.
a second, that can't be right. How did that happen?
That's right. Yes.
It's a very good lesson to teach kids. I like that. One of the things we like to emphasize and talk about is making sure that all students are getting equitable access to STEM courses. Do you have any thoughts on that? How do you, across districts, schools can have very different budgets and different demographic areas. How important is it for making sure that everyone has access to these STEM kind of courses?
Oh, it's so important. And I think this is an area that we all really need to focus on and work on improving, because you're right, it's not equitable right now. And I think for a long time, there was a real push in elementary schools to increase their standardized testing scores in ELA and math. And what that meant for a lot of students in urban settings, especially, is that science and social studies got pushed to the background. And
Mm.
it ended up being a huge failure and backfiring, because, now that the science of reading has really come out, and we're very focused on what students need to become good readers. It turns out that all that background knowledge and vocabulary, where students are using the vocabulary that they're getting multiple times, they're reading about it, they're writing about it, they're doing hands-on experiments. All of that is so important to students learning how to read,
Mm.
that I think we're going to start to see science come back. So I know in the state of Rhode Island, for ELA and for math, you have to have a curriculum that the state has approved, and coming in the next couple of years is going to be the same for science. So along with that is going to come a standardized test associated with it, which is not my favorite thing that's going to happen, but the silver lining is that science is going to start to become as important as those other subjects. Um,
Right, right.
so
One
I,
step at a time.
yeah, exactly. And to answer your question, I think the biggest thing is that teachers and parents need to keep pushing and asking about science, and, emphasizing to to the administrators and to their leaders in their state that science is really important, because teachers and parents are pushing for it, it's going to find its way back in. And I would also say, like, for teachers and administrators to look for creative ways to incorporate more STEM. I know in my school, I'm going to give a shout out to my colleague Sarah Reese, who is an MLL teacher, but because she felt so strongly that students, all students in our school really need to have science, and that especially newer elementary teachers often struggle with like a massive amount of things on their plate. She said, you know what,
Hmm.
I'll teach your science, and then I'll pull my small group and we'll talk about science because I'm a language teacher. Science is a great way to teach language. So that was
That's
a real
awesome.
creative solution that we had in our school. And I think it's just about that, like knowing that you need to have it and finding different ways, to implement it in your setting.
That's awesome. We did a podcast not that long ago with people talking about learning English as a second language and how important science can be because it forces the kids to communicate and use vocabulary
Yes.
and work together as opposed to just trying to drive it into them. They're trying to explain a concept they're super excited about. And it's very, very interesting to me to learn. And that's very similar to what you're talking about. That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Along those lines, I mean, it's also probably very inspiring to see women in STEM. I'm sure that that's another issue of making sure that we get more women involved in engineering and technology and math and all that kind of stuff. So you're there showing that it can be done. How do you feel about that aspect of things, of sort of inspiring the next generation of young women?
Oh, I feel honored that you could put me in that category. Yes, absolutely. I think we're starting to see a lot more women in STEM, and anytime I can have people that are actually in STEM fields come into my classroom and talk about their careers and how they got there, I do that. I think that's really, really important. And so I've had a lot of women in careers that have probably typically been viewed as male engineers and soil scientists come in. This year I had a nurse come in, a surgeon come in, a civil engineer come in. I think students really need to see themselves represented, female students, students of different backgrounds and races, and everybody needs to be able to see like, oh, this could be me. Um,
Mhm.
so I think that's critical.
Yeah, I come from sort of a comics and art and graphic novel background, and the concept of representation matters has become so huge over the last decade. And I think it's just, and it's wonderful to see it's sort of everywhere. You know, people really, really recognizing that and embracing that. And I think this is a great thing for kids to look up and say, "Hey, I can do that. That's a possible path. What a great thing."
Yeah, it's so important.
If teachers wanted to get deeper into STEM, if they really want to do this, are there resources out there you would maybe point people to? If districts were looking at maybe creating a STEM specialist position, would you recommend that? What kind of resources are out there for teachers who really, really want to get into this?
I think there's great resources out there in your local community and environmental educators associations. So looking for those informal environmental educators or informal educators in your community, I think is a great place to start. You mentioned before that I'm associated with RIA, which is the Rhode Island Environmental Education Association, and I've had many groups be a part of my classroom. One group in particular is called the Woonasquatucket River Watershed Council, and they'll come into my classroom and do a, a lesson a month with students. And then at the end of the year,
Hmm.
we do a field trip. We raise trout in our classroom, and then we'll go release them into the river. So a
Oh, that's
great
awesome.
place to start. And one of the nice things about that is that I don't have to do the teaching. Right? I have another group of educators that come in that are super passionate and super knowledgeable about what they're doing. They come in and they do all the teaching, and then we collaborate on the field trip. And I feel like students get a lot out of it. It's also so strongly place-based education that,
Hmm.
they're really learning about. We have a river right outside our school, and
Hmm.
before we started that program, I don't think a lot of students even knew the name of it. Um, really. So
Wow.
it's
Yeah.
been a huge that to me is like a huge piece. And then some other I was thinking about some other resources. There's sort of like three tiers of that. One of the tiers I would say if you want to just have like a STEM night or you want to just have some really simple STEM activities for your students to try to get your feet wet. If you go to We Are Teachers and you look up STEM activities, they'll kind of take the number of, there's just so many resources out there, but they'll kind of limit it down to the top 15 or the top 20. So that's a great place to go. Another place that I go a lot is PBS Learning Media. They have a lot of awesome resources there, including videos, interactive lessons, lesson plans that can be integrated right away into your classroom. They have full curriculums there too. If you wanted to go even further and say like, oh, I really want to dive into geology, they have tons of resources and you can really pull together a whole unit, or just do one video if you want. And also lots of careers. So even if you just wanted to culminate a unit by looking at some possible careers that are out there, they have great videos and resources there. And then finally, if you're sorry, if you
No, go ahead.
if you're looking for like a full unit kit, the materials, the whole 9 yards in an engineering format, the Museum of Science has a great resource called oh boy, Engineering is Elemental, and their kits come with a read aloud book, and then the whole STEM activity is based on that read aloud. So I used the magnetic kits before, and we learn about magnets. There's a story that goes with it, and then students build their own maglev trains as part of that unit. Yeah.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, something that comes up time and time again in this podcast is using your local area, like you said about your river. Just that kind of stuff I think really drives it home for kids. And, I'm lucky enough to live in San Diego. We have, oceanography people up and down the coast.
Yes.
So it would seem to be like there's always something to reach out to have people they love to come to classrooms. So I think that's a wonderful start. You were the STEM specialist for your school, and now you said that everyone's teaching. But do you feel that a STEM specialist would be, if districts were interested in that, what kind of advantages are to have someone who is literally their STEM specialist? How do you feel about that? But is that a good thing that districts and schools should be looking into?
I loved being the STEM specialist. It was a great, I think it was a really great thing for students, and I was really a resource for teachers too, which I loved doing. And we had some reasons why we switched our model. Some of it was budget, and some of it was that when I was the STEM specialist, there was not as many teachers teaching science as part of their school day. So when we switched that model to, it was, when I thought about it, I think the idea of teachers teaching science in their classroom every day is really powerful and important. If in a perfect world, you would have both. You would have teachers teaching science as a regular part of their day, and then you might also have a STEM specialist. I know some schools, my kids go to school in Norwood, Massachusetts, and they had a model where they had a science specialist come in, teach the hands-on activity, and really give a lot of background to teachers, and then teachers would do the reading and the writing and the research part that's associated with that. And that really worked for them. They loved that model. So I think whatever way your school can integrate more science into the school day is really important. And I, as a science educator that came from, I started as a STEM specialist and then switched over to being a fourth grade teacher. I still have a really strong affiliation with the professional development group in Rhode Island called GEMSnet. They're wonderful. And so I'm a teacher leader in my building. So teachers still know, like, oh, if I have a science issue, I can go to Stacy and she'll help me out. And I really love that role. And that professional development group has been so important to my growth as a teacher.
I love that you're the person to go to, the science person. We have a science issue. Go to Stacy. I love that. That's awesome. Well, Stacy, the podcast is It's Time for Science, and this was wonderful because it is time for science, and you did a fantastic job explaining this. I think that STEM is such an important aspect of this, and I hope that teachers have learned something from you, and I can't thank you enough for being here.
Thank you so much, Tom. I really enjoyed it.
Well, it's time for science, and it is time to continue talking about STEM education. We're going to talk about the importance of STEM in our schools, how it can get kids interested and inspired to pursue careers in science. My guest is Dr. Alex Dainis. Alex is a freelance science communicator and video producer with over a decade of experience producing digital education content for the web. Her background includes a PhD in genetics from Stanford University, and she was honored to be a 2019 Jackson Wild Media Lab Fellow. And recently, like I believe this past week, is a recipient of the 2024 National Academy's Eric and Wendy Schmidt Award for Excellence in Science Communication, which is an awesome award, but just too long to say. They have
Yes.
to shorten that down. So recent projects include Hungry Planet, a 6-episode series for PBS Digital Studios. And she's additionally the project coordinator for the Camille and Henry Dreyfus Foundation's Chemistry Shorts program, and a host and writer for the American Chemical Society's Reactions YouTube channel. Now that is a resume. Dr. Alex Dainis, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I am super excited to chat with you today.
I was very excited. I reached out to you because I'm a follower. I've been following you for some time. We had Maynard Okereke on, the hip hop science MD, and so I follow a lot of science people. And you responded right away, and I was very excited because you do the coolest stuff in a whole new field of how things are done. So we're going to talk about that later. But I want to start off, since our podcast is aimed pretty much at K through 12 elementary school teachers, we want to talk about the importance of STEM education in general. Why do you think overall STEM is important for kids, especially in the younger grades of elementary?
I mean, I think broadly, certainly STEM education is important to creating adults and kids who are excited to make decisions about the world around them using science. We are asked every single day to make decisions about science, be it the foods that we are buying at the grocery store, be it medical decisions at the doctor's office, be it whether or not we're going to put on sunscreen in the morning. We are constantly asked to make scientific decisions in our daily lives. And so I think STEM education is just critical to making people feel excited and equipped to make those decisions. I think it's super important whether somebody wants to go into science or not. But personally, my STEM education changed the path of my life. I was a kid who liked school. I was really into a lot of different subjects, but my AP Bio teacher put all of us on a bus one day and sent us 45 minutes down the road to a local college where we did an absolutely fake forensics lab. But I held a pipette in my hand and I loaded an agarose gel. And I thought, I want to do this every day for the rest of my life. Like, this is the coolest thing I've ever done. I want to do this. And then I went and I got a PhD in genetics. I went and I did that every day of my life for a very long time.
Little did you know, holding that pipette.
Truly, I had no idea. But I think, broadly it's good for all these big, important reasons, but also on personal levels, I think there are experiences that you can have in your STEM education journey and that your students can have in their STEM education journey that will impact them so much it changes their life. It happened to me. I believe it. It's real.
Now, we come back to that time and time again in this podcast about how important science is for teaching just critical thinking and language skills, and how kids can have to communicate and work together in groups. These are things that help them no matter what they do. It doesn't matter if they go into business or whatever. That kind of thing is unlike any other class. That's why we love the whole science thing, is it sort of encompasses all of those things, math and English and social studies and all that kind of stuff. So I was going to ask about a teacher who's influenced you, but you already said that. You had your AP Bio teacher. But in general, yeah, it's just, how about when you got to college? What were the things that you just sort of inspired you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I am so lucky that I had an incredible range of teachers throughout from, Mr. Lay in 4th and 5th grade, who was having us, make little catapults to launch marshmallows and getting me excited about physics, all the way through AP Bio. And then on certainly to college and graduate school, I had a really incredible series of mentors. And I think one of the things that you just mentioned is the fact that it helps with critical thinking skills. I had a postdoc that I worked with in graduate school who wasn't my direct mentor, but by virtue of being sort of above me in the lab was a really great mentor. And she left academia to go into consulting. And I remember I was really confused. I was like, why would a consulting firm want a PhD geneticist? Like, that makes no sense to me. And she responded, no, it's not that they want the genetics. It's that being from science shows that I have those critical thinking skills, that I can ask good questions, that I can find answers to those questions. And that really helped me reframe how I thought about my own educational journey. That certainly science does include learning of some facts. It does include having to memorize some things, but that's not the point. It's about the process. It's about being able to work through that. And I now in my career as a science communicator, I don't pipette every day. I do sometimes, but I don't do that every day anymore. But I use those skills of critical thinking. I use those skills of asking questions. I use those skills of being able to look at a bunch of data and figure out what it means and try and draw my own conclusions. So just yes anding and 100% agreeing that there is some of it that's about that science knowledge, and that is so important to how people perceive science. But it's also one of the biggest things I think about in science communication is how do we best communicate that process and that thinking style? And that is so important.
Yeah, I mean that's what all science has in common, right? Is that part of it? You go down different paths, maybe very specific, but the concept's the same. It's the same sort of asking questions and getting all that stuff. And I love it. The more I get into this, is because I come from sort of an art background, not an education background, but I'm learning more and more. And just the kids get excited about it because the things they have to do, and like you said, you're standing there with a pipette and forensics, and it's so much more interesting than anything else. So I wanted to also focus specifically, it's a question that I almost hate bringing up because it's sad that we have to keep bringing it up, but the idea of how important it is to get girls involved in science early is because I certainly come from an older generation where, as I think about it, yeah, the only people we saw on screen ever were white men in jackets and white coats, and so the importance of STEM, especially for women, and then later I want to get into the science communication and how the internet has changed that, but in general, focusing on why it's important that we get girls excited about this too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the whole point of getting women and girls excited in STEM and retaining them in STEM, which is a big part of it, is the fact that we want the best possible talent out there. And that best possible talent comes from everybody. You need everybody to be a part of the pool that is helping it to solve big problems in the world. The solutions aren't just going to come from one group of people. We need everybody involved in this. And I think for me, one of the things that I think is becoming really clear in the field is that it's not really an excitement thing for young girls and for women. Young girls and women are excited about science. It's that retention part. That is the really hard part, that it becomes easy to be pushed out of science. It becomes uh, combative is maybe too strong of a word, but I think there are a lot of pressures that push women out. And some of it is social. Some of it is no, no, science is just for boys. So you don't belong here kind of thing. Some of it is very direct. Mid grad school, was the only female presenter at a 2-day conference and had someone come up and talk to me afterwards, and I think it was kind of pointed, but he pretended it wasn't, talking about those token women they have speak at these conferences. And I was shocked he was saying it directly to me and also wondering what he said when I wasn't there, kind of thing.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and it's sad that was maybe 2017, 2018, that's still the way that people view it. And I think it could be really easy at that point to be like, well, fine, I don't belong here. And I've had those experiences along the way of people making me feel like I didn't belong there. And that's tough over time to keep fighting back against, to keep saying like, no, I do, I do, I do. And I don't want to have to do that. I just want to have to do the science. And I think it's that additional burden of having to say like, no, I do belong here and I do want to do this and I do want to fight against those things that, again, traditionally white men in lab coats haven't had to take on that additional burden. So I think though that that's changing. I think I've certainly seen it change over the course of time that I've been a science student and then a scientist and then beyond. And I was really lucky that I had great female science teachers all along the way. But you are right that the people we saw on television were almost exclusively men. And even now, it's really hard to find a completely female hosted science show. Often women are relegated to be sort of co hosts and that kind of thing. Um, and for me, I mean, I was an adult at this point in time, and I wasn't the target demographic of this show, but Emily Calandrelli hosted Emily's Wonder Lab on Netflix a couple years ago, and she did it at like 8 months pregnant. And
Hmm.
for me, seeing her leading this show that she had conceptualized and pitched and then hosted and just like rocking at her job in this female science host role as a pregnant woman was so cool to me. And it really was like a role model moment where I was like, oh, if she can do it, I can too. If she
Right.
can do this and she can be a mom and she can go out there and just give her everything, I can too. And I think that is so important. And I'm so glad that there are women like Emily, and I hope to some small degree, me and others who are trying to sort of show that, no, you can do this. Like, this is for us too. This is for everyone.
Right. Yeah, it's obviously I'm probably not qualified to speak about it, but it does seem like you say, okay, you've gotten pregnant. Okay, everything stops. You just go do that
Yeah.
now. It's like, well,
Yep.
wait, no, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
And the older I get, the more just the phrase, we'll come back to it, is representation matters and how important that has become. And I want to talk about that a little bit now, getting into the science communication thing. Obviously, if you went back in time 10, 15 years and said, hey, your career path is going to be science communicator, tens of thousands of people are going to follow you as you talk about weird genetic things on whiteboards, you would have went, who the heck are you and why are you here? So
Yes.
what an amazing thing that the internet has given us. So many negative things about the internet, but there's so many positive things about like this, where we're literally getting that representation matters. You're on the screen. Maynard Okereke was on the screen. So it becomes normal for the next generation of kids to see a woman talk about this thing and not even think twice about it, which is
Yeah.
awesome. So I want to know how you got into that. Some of your videos go back 10 something years. So you were in grad school still at the time. What started that? Did you have a background in video, or how did this start?
Yeah, so it goes back, gosh, I started my YouTube channel in 2012, which feels like forever ago at this point in time.
The
And
dark ages.
it was truly of the internet. It was the Wild West. And I did not know that science communication was a thing. I had never heard that phrase
I
before.
don't think it was.
It wasn't. No, it wasn't a
Yeah,
field, it wasn't a thing, but
yeah.
I had double majored in undergrad in both biology and film, and I loved both, and I thought I was gonna have to choose one. I knew that, David Attenborough existed and Bill Nye existed, but that was not a realistic career path. I thought I was gonna have to choose between one of the 2. And after I graduated from undergrad, I went to work at a production company for a couple years and
Mm.
loved it and like really had a great time at that company. I learned a lot of skills, but I missed talking about science. And so this thing called YouTube was just people talking in their bedrooms at the time. But
Right.
I wanted an outlet to talk about science. And I almost didn't start my YouTube channel because SciShow had started the year before. And I thought, oh, there's already one science channel on YouTube. They don't need 2. Like, you can't have 2 science channels.
No,
Um,
I
no,
can't do that.
no, which now we know is just there's a whole ecosystem of them. But I'm
Yeah.
glad I did because I just started talking about science. Truly, it was in my bedroom before I went to grad school. I was just talking about science, and incredibly, people showed up and they watched. And it was a really, truly, it was just a hobby. It was a fun thing for me to do. It was a fun outlet. And it took a little bit of a break in my first couple years of grad school. And then I picked it back up again because I missed having sort of a creative outlet. But it really was just
Mm.
a hobby. It was a fun thing that I did until 2017, when I was really excited that this hobby meant I got to go to NASA and film a video with astronaut Kate Rubins, who was the first person to sequence
Mm.
DNA in space. Absolute role model, so cool. Like, I don't know if I've ever met a cooler person than Kate Rubins. And I made this video, and there was a small biotech company in Boston who saw that and said, "Oh, we like these videos you're making. Would you make some
Mm.
for us too?" And that company was called Mini PCR Bio. I still work with them to this day. They're an incredible company that makes a lot of education resources for science classrooms to bring equipment and sort of modern genetics tools into classrooms, which is super fun.
Mm.
And I started making videos with them, and they were my first freelance client. And they gave me the confidence and the springboard that when I completed my PhD in 2018, I said, okay, I'm going to give myself a year and see if I can make a career out of making
Mm.
science videos. And that was 6 years ago now, and I'm incredibly grateful that I have been able to make a career out of this and continue doing it, but my motivation has absolutely changed. At the beginning, it was fun and it was a hobby, and I still find it fun. This is still my absolute dream job, but in the process of being involved in what I now know is called science communication for 12 years, it has become clear how needed it is. And again, how little we have prepared the public to make genetics decisions. And so it's really
Mhm.
become a huge part of my mission to try and make people feel comfortable and included in these conversations as we're facing all kind of stuff of genome editing and GMOs and just all these things where I don't think that answers to these questions should be left up to just scientists and politicians. I think we should have
Mhm.
patients and caregivers and everyone involved in making these kinds of decisions. But to do that, we have to welcome them to the conversation. So I think that starts in K through 12. That starts in the science classroom of helping these students feel prepared to take part in this. And I love that I
Mhm.
get to work with people like Mini PCR Bio who do that, who bring this stuff to those classrooms. But then I think where I and some other science communicators can also add value is continuing that conversation onwards and continuing that conversation into adulthood and really saying, like, yeah, you learned that stuff, but now let's use it. Now let's like really transform it. And that can start absolutely in the classroom. But I have a lot of fun trying to bridge that gap sometimes.
Right. Well, you were so uniquely positioned, somebody who studied film and biology. I mean,
Yes,
that's pretty rare in and of itself right there. So,
it's very rare.
and also, to compliment you quite a bit here in terms of, I think you're, a lot of people can do a YouTube video about something, but the idea of taking very complex information and making it accessible, that's hard. And you do a wonderful job at that. And I think that that's
Thank
what's
you.
really, like you said, as it becomes more of a mission, that's what people need to see is like, obviously you have a PhD in genetics, so it's super complex stuff, but you make it accessible. And we need that.
And that's the other thing that I think science as a field has really struggled with, that I
Mm,
think as scientists we are sometimes taught to we're try we're taught to make ourselves look smart. We are
mm,
taught to show how much we know and how smart
right.
we are and how and when I'm learning something, I don't want to learn it from someone who's just trying to prove how smart they are, right? Like I want to learn it from someone who's like, no, no, here's why it's cool and here's why we're going to talk about it, and like brings it down, whatever it is, to where I'm at. And I think that to me is a change we need from the science field at large. And it's coming. I think it is really happening. I think my
For
generation and the
sure.
next generation and the generation above me a little bit too recognize that. But I think so
Mhm.
much of science is trying to prove how smart we are and how much we know. And that's not
Yeah.
welcoming. That is not accessible. And it's not fun. Like, there's a lot of
No, no.
traditional science media that I don't really want to watch or listen to.
Right.
So I appreciate that, because that's something I really, really strive to do, is to not do that and to try and say,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
how would I have this conversation with a friend? And the
Right.
viewer is my friend, and I'm just going to have that conversation as if we're drinking coffee and talking about this thing.
Right.
So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, it's such a good point because I grew up in the days when, yeah, it was like they were the experts and you do not question them and they would talk
Yes.
down to you and just listen to what I say. And yeah, it's so off-putting. It's like
Yeah.
I don't want to be a part of that world. So this
No.
is I really hope that this part of the internet is really making good revolutionary change. And it feels like it. It really feels like it because I see more and more of that. And I think it's wonderful that you're doing this, and so important for our kids to see the representation and just science in general. So is there anything else you want to talk about? Tell me things you're working on. I mean, what's hot out there in science right now, and what's the kind of stuff that you're excited to talk about?
Yeah, so I have been working on a bunch of different projects. Interestingly enough, even though I am a geneticist by training and I think genetics is the coolest and biology is the best, I work with a lot of chemistry clients. So I work with, as I mentioned before, the Camille and Henry Dreyfus Foundation, which makes a series called Chemistry Shorts that is sort of aimed at the high school classroom and has NGSS aligned content with it, trying to show that chemistry is solving big problems. And
Mm,
it's more about making a beautiful, fun, exciting film about chemistry and showing students that, hey, there's big stuff happening out in the world that you're concerned about, and chemistry can help solve it, versus worrying so much about showing the exact electron pushing of a redox reaction. We do make sure that that is accurate, but it's
mm,
less important for us to m- teach a specific reaction than it is to show students that chemistry can be fun and that chemistry is important and that chemistry is helping solve problems. And so that's been something I've really, really enjoyed working on recently. And we've been doing it with some cool production companies. We just had a film come out where we were talking about polymer coatings on microbes. And our scientist had this analogy that she was like, yeah, it's like they're putting on an Iron Man suit, and the Iron Man suit is protecting the microbes so they can go out and do their jobs. So we had an animation crew come in and animate a little Iron Man suit around a microbe kind of thing. And so it's fun. And so that's been a really fun project. But also, again, in the chemistry sphere, I work a lot with the American Chemical Society, and they let me for the past 5 months just dive into the science of color because I
Mm.
realized how little I understood about how color is actually produced.
Oh
And,
man.
I know that, okay, some light waves bounce off, some light waves are absorbed, da da da. But I was like, no, but why? But why? But why? And they let me spend like 5 months talking to people and researching, but why? But why? But why? And that video just came out. And that feels like one that was
I
so fun to
I
make
gotta
and
find that
so
one.
fun.
Oh,
Yeah, it
yeah.
was it was really fun. So that's a project I've been super excited about. That again, I've been so grateful that I am in a position where I can go to my clients and be like, "Hey, I don't understand this. Can I make a video about it?" And they'll say yes. Um
Well, that's like the core of what we're talking about. The why,
yes. Yes.
why, and that's what's so great about it. And now we can explore it in ways that we couldn't before. You can take a camera and go ask those questions, and that's the
Yes.
coolest thing.
Yeah.
Oh man, as an artist, yeah, color is like the most complex thing in the world. And every time I read about it, I'm like, that's great. I still don't get it,
Yeah.
but I'm gonna have to watch that video. Maybe I'll learn more.
Well, and that was one of the fun things is one of the first people that I talked to was actually an art professor. And
Mm,
he and I talked for maybe 90 minutes about how
mm,
artists think about color and about all these different ways that you can model a color space. And
mm.
unfortunately, because we only had a 20-minute video, very little of that actually made it into the final cut. But that's one of my favorite parts of my job is that I get to go talk
Yeah,
to people about things they're passionate about. And that I think
right.
is the thing that I hope I can bring forward is that scientists and artists and community members, all these people are passionate about stuff. And that's what I'm trying to show is that passion.
Mm,
And whatever that student watching is passionate about, I don't care if it's science. I don't care if it's art. I don't care if it's history. Like take that and take that passion and use it. And that's what we all
yeah,
need. So
yeah.
again, I got to have a great conversation. Didn't really turn into much in the video, but I had fun.
That's right. You
Um,
learned a whole bunch. Yeah,
I
exactly.
did. I learned a
Yeah,
ton.
yeah. I know passion is the most amazing thing. Whenever you see a musician's passion, I can't play music. I love it. I just love seeing what they talk about and all that kind of
Yes.
stuff. And it's funny because I always, whenever we talk about STEM in the back of my artist brain, I always say, I want it to be STEAM because I really feel art is a part of this. I really do. Very important. As you were talking about, it is a part of it. Video, just making video. That's the art part. Bringing it
Yes.
down to making it understandable is the art part. So
Yes.
I always kind of like, yes, I love STEM, but I want it to be STEAM. So that's just me.
No, I agree 100%. I mean, that is me, right? Like I'm blending the art with the science and I have to give a shout out, a tiny shout out because it is National Chemistry Week when we're recording this and this year's one is on the chemistry of photography and sort of
Oh,
picture perfect chemistry. And my
I love that.
grandmother was a scientist at Polaroid back in the day. And so, she
Wow.
was a physicist, figuring out how to make different lamps and different, phosphors for transmitting colors kind of thing. And so
Oh,
I
that's
want to
great.
I want to claim that that sort of merger of art and science runs deep in my blood, somewhere starting with my
All right,
grandma.
great.
So yeah,
That's even
I
we could get into that for an hour, just talking about
oh,
your own influence. Your grandmother is a scientist back in the day, man.
yes. Yes.
That's amazing.
It's
Oh,
unfortunate that this is an audio medium and not a visual one because I saw a great picture of her that I want to submit to be like stock photo scientist of the 60s kind of
ah.
thing where she's just like standing in a lab coat, in front of this equipment she's helped put together and I was like this is great. Like I
Oh,
love
man.
this.
Oh, she had some stories I would love to hear. Oh,
Yes,
that's great.
same.
So all right. Well, Alex, this has been great. I'm really excited to talk to you. If people need to follow you, where should people be following you on the interwebs?
Yes, I am at Alex Dainis everywhere. If you search
Every-
ALEXDAINIS, I'll pop up on all your favorite social medias.
She's everywhere all the time talking
Yes.
about science.
Yes.
Alex,
Anytime anyone will let me talk about science, I'm going to take it.
that's now your job. That's the whole point. Alex, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This was super fun.
Producer David Littman here. At the end of our second season of It's Time for Science, we just wanted to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for listening. Please remember to like and subscribe and keep sending us your suggestions. Thank you so much.
It's Time for Science is produced, recorded, and edited by David Lippman and Tom Racine, and is sponsored by School Specialty and FOSS, the full option science system, at the Lawrence Hall of Science, UC Berkeley. Be sure to check out FOSS over on Facebook and Twitter.